Thank you for having me here. My name's Flo. I'm over at NerdWallet. And I'm gonna start with sharing you guys my personal recruiting story. It's always actually ironic when you've spent most of your career as a recruiter and then you go through it yourself. Very fascinating. So a couple years ago, I started going down the path, looking for my next adventure. Started talking to a handful of companies in the Bay Area, here in San Francisco. There was one company I was talking to, didn't have funding. None of my friends had heard of them, and they didn't have much brand awareness. But there was something that kept on just sticking out to me about the company and about my experience. And if I could sum it up in one way, I would say it was super authentic. Just super authentic in every little sense of the word. At every given point, the recruiter, who actually happened to be the CEO of the company, was shepherding me the entire way. He would always ask me, hey, is there anything else we can share with you? Is there anyone else that you could talk to get a better sense of the company? And I think at one point he actually said to me, hey, by the way, take your time. We want you. We want to have you here. And we want you to make a great decision. So if he was trying to close me, he did a hell of a job. So a couple weeks later, as I was narrowing my search, he came up with this, I think, pretty clever hack. He actually told me to have dinner with this gentleman named Dan, who I thought at the time was the COO of the company. I go to dinner with Dan. We spent about 3 hours. It was amazing. It was over my favorite food. It was Korean barbecue. And Dan's just selling me on the company, telling me to come. And I'm like, this is great. I could do this. I can see myself working with you. And he's like, oh yeah, but I didn't sign yet. I was like, what? What are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. But Tim had intentionally put us together with the idea that we were actually going to have this conversation and actually join together. So I would say that was a pretty incredible hack on his part. I ended up landing at NerdWallet. And in the spirit of turbocharging your recruiting efforts, I'm going to show you guys a little bit here of my previous life. So I think many of you guys are familiar with the Zynga story. Pretty phenomenal growth, one of the best in recent memory. I had the opportunity to join there very early, loved every 4 years of it, left by the time we were about 3,200 in 2012. And cool thing is I get to do it again. I get to help a company grow. I love figuring this stuff out. It's awesome. And I hope to share with you guys a little bit more about the recruiting journey, the hacks that I've learned along the way, and really, how do you think about hiring a great recruiting partner? So, recruiting partner. Show of hands of folks that have tried to hire a recruiter. Okay. Show of hands of folks that think it has been very, very easy. I can't even say, okay. Okay, I got one up there. Okay. So some qualities that are just essential to a recruiter's being: hustle, heart, tenacity, and passion. This person is going to be representing you and your business. They've got to have all of that. They've got to be your proxy when they're out there. Along with that, they have to have these skills. So this is what I look at in terms of like arsenal. What's in our arsenal, right? A common question I would get from a lot of the entrepreneurs I've worked with is, Flo, we need the top of the funnel. Help me with the top of the funnel. Very common. There you go, right? That's a big part of a recruiter's job. It's identifying, it's sleuthing, it's researching. Another part is they're selling your story, especially when you're trying to build a brand. They're out there, they're engaging, they're selling, they're pitching. And the idea is that they can help convert a lot of candidates your way. Now, the assessment and evaluation, this is gonna be a big chunk of time for you. It's a big chunk of time for your company. You're gonna be spending a lot of time in this area. So just as much as they are qualifying candidates for you, they're also doing a good job disqualifying folks that you should not be spending time with. And then if everything works magically, you get a great hire. You get to close on someone. So what I thought I would do is take you guys into a more tactical exercise, and we'll spend time just kind of teasing out some of these areas and some sample questions I actually ask. Cool? Okay, awesome. All right, so for recruiters, this is a common question I ask. Why is this important, and what distinguishes a great answer? Well, many of you that are hiring or will be hiring, that could be your only hire you'll have for the next month. That could be your 4th employee in the company. The last thing you want a recruiter to do is take a rec and say, all right, let me go see what I can find. They're not qualifying it. They're not trying to understand, how does this role actually map up to your business objectives? How does this role actually ladder up to the company's goals and the company's objectives? And if they're pitching this to a candidate, think about the narrative that they're trying to build. They're trying to tell a candidate a story, an opportunity, not a job. The other questions I would ask is, hey, if this person crushed it over the next year, what could their career path be at? What could their career path be like at our company? And again, just really synthesizing a narrative around the opportunity, not the job. Okay, we love LinkedIn, and I hope this is never true. But this question is meant to help get you a better sense of how a recruiter can hustle, how they can be scrappy, and how they can be very versatile, okay? There's three channels that you can go through as a recruiter, okay? You go through your source channel, everyone knows about that. You go through your referral, and you go through your application. So, sourcing. Some tools and technology that you might hear them rattle off. I go through A-List, I go through Intello. Oh, I use Guild, I'll use Connectifier, I use Reportive. And you'll hear them rattle it off. And the idea is that they're actually staying on top of the technology, they've tried to use it, and more importantly, how could you actually use that to your advantage? If you're really turbocharging your recruiting, you want to be able to place a lot of bets on different types of tools and technology. But on the other hand, you want them to actually have a point of view of what may not work for you. And that can actually save you some time and money. Because just because there's a fancy tool out there, it might not actually be best for you guys. All right, the pitch. I'll tell you, a couple years ago when I was working with a company, I went through this pitch exercise with a couple of the founders and then early team members, and every single person had a different pitch. Every single person had a different pitch. When you think about building your brand and you think about telling your story, this has got to be tight. And specifically when you have a recruiter that's going to be working with you, representing your company, representing your vision, this is a great place to start with them. I made the mistake of actually asking a recruiter to pitch the company that she was interviewing at, which is ours. Don't think that's really fair. Wouldn't advise that. But I will encourage you guys to ask recruiters, hey, pitch to me the company you're currently representing. Are they going to give you just a checklist of what you guys do? Or are they going to talk about what problem are you solving? Why is it interesting? Why are you doing it better than another competitor? And why does it even matter to them? And if you can tie that all in, what they should accomplish is the ability to elicit an emotional response, to inspire someone to say yes, to inspire someone to swipe right? Okay, rapport, credibility, trust, you hear all these words, but they actually really matter. For recruiters, above anything else, what you should tease out is their ability to connect with people. Connection, human connection. Sometimes it's awkward for some folks, but for recruiters, we better love it. This is our job, this is our business. This is what we should do naturally. So establishing a common ground. Something that we use at NerdWallet is every single time we create like a touch point with a candidate. Say for instance, we conduct an in-mail, right? If there's information, and there's a lot of access to information now, right? If you go on LinkedIn, if you go on Twitter, Facebook, anywhere, you can find something about that person. They'll always weave it into a message, right? We're trying to maximize our success here, right? So we'll weave it into our outbound message. We'll also use it during our conversations. So this is very deliberate, it's very intentional. And if you can do this early on, and if you can invest in this early on, I'm gonna tell you, having crazy conversations about compensation, trying to close a candidate, it's gonna be that much easier. Okay, hiring climate. I like this question for recruiters because it really gives you a sense as a founder, how is this person actually gonna help me navigate through things? Do we have blind spots as a company? How are we affected by some areas cooling off? And then what should we be doing differently now that they have a better sense of the competitive landscape? not only can this person help you and just help you navigate and anticipate some of those challenges, but actually think of how they could be a force multiplier for your hiring managers and for the rest of your company. A few more. Okay, structure, interview, process. All right, like I mentioned earlier, you guys are gonna spend a lot of time on interviewing, and a lot of time on interviewing sometimes the wrong people. We want to maximize this time. This is precious. This is like gold to you guys, right? You could be thinking about product. You can be thinking about your consumers. So the recruiter's ability to structure this is going to be incredibly helpful. Here's what I would expect for them to start with. What are the skills you're actually using? What skills should this person know? And then what questions should you use to tease that out? And then also in what format? So we do this in a variety of ways. For some, we'll actually send a case study home. For some, we'll actually have folks do an on-site case study in front of a team. And then for some candidates, we'll actually have them do whiteboarding. But the point of sharing that with you guys is there's a lot of different ways to do it, but you have to structure in a way that really maximizes your ability to understand what this candidate's great at. And you're not gonna do it for all candidates. Do you do it for more seasoned ones? Do you do it for folks that are actually building out strategy? So really being very deliberate with actually how you'll do this. And the last point I'll add to it is the interview process, sometimes we think like, hey, these are things that we want to do. This is what we want to actually get out of it. Oftentimes we're not thinking about what the candidate wants to get out of it. So be careful about how much friction you actually incorporate into this process. Okay, so I will tell you about 40% of the candidates you're going to talk to, they're going to come from this pool. 40%. They're not actively looking. They're casually having conversations. Your ability to get in front of them is really critical. If there's one thing I can share with you, go out of your way. Go out of your way for passive candidates. Informationals are a really great way to do that. There's a courting process. There's, I've been in recruiting now for 17 years, and what I'll tell you about the landscape that's changed very differently for me and how it's actually shaped the way that we recruit is we spend an incredible amount of time hosting folks for informationals, taking folks out to lunch, and just really, really catering to them. I know, it's a different market, right? But it's been a different market for a couple years, and these are things that you actually have to invest in. A couple years ago, I was actually on a search. I was a third recruiter on this search. Search wasn't going really well. And the hiring manager was getting really, really impatient. I found a candidate, resume, everything. It was just like, everything was in sync. I gave him a call. It was in the morning time, and the lights were just going on. I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is him. This is the candidate. And I said, what are you doing in a couple hours? He was like, nothing, why? And I was like, would you like to go out for lunch? Can I come down your way and meet you? I think it was really bold, but I'll tell you, that's an example of just going out of your way and doing something distinct and different to help accelerate your ability to recruit. The guy ended up getting a job there and staying for a couple years at the company. So it was awesome, pretty awesome story. Okay, so closing. Okay. The one common mistake I see recruiters make here is teams are excited, everyone's pumped up about closing this candidate. We found a great person, let's get them an offer. Let's do it, let's go. But is the candidate even ready for the offer, right? How many of you guys have had that happen? Yeah, you find yourself in a really, really uncomfortable spot. So, how do you know when a candidate is ready to go through the closing process? Your recruiter should know how this candidate makes decisions. How do you make decisions? What's your decision framework? Okay, know your decision framework. So of all those aspects of your decisions, how would you stack rank them? If I got you this and not this, would that work? And then who do they actually make decisions with at home? That's super important. The other aspect I would add to this is if someone's actually actively interviewing, you want to know where they're at in that stage with the other company. You don't want a stale offer. Stale offers are no good. They're just going to sit there if you give your offer too early, and they're going to go and they're going to shop around and they're going to compare it. And then compensation. This could be a very awkward conversation for a lot of folks, but what you should be looking for in your recruiter is that they have the ability to be super direct, right? They've already built that rapport. They've already connected with that candidate. And most importantly, if you are having a conversation about compensation as a recruiter when everyone agrees that this person's great and they've already on-sited the candidate, it's gonna be a very big challenge for you. I'll tell you that. You wanna wedge this early enough in the experience when both parties have a mutual interest in each other. The other thing around compensation, for any of you guys, if you have a compensation philosophy that you've been working towards or you've been building in your company, that will also distinguish you. And that's something your recruiter can use, right? Giving that information early, really disarming that candidate from having to disclose theirs without a lot from us, right? So this is something we actually train all of our recruiters on. So areas of coverage for closing. I'll say this again, if the closing piece is just about comp, that's gonna be your entire conversation, and it's not gonna be fun. And I think for so many of you guys that are building companies, there's something very distinct and something very distinguishable about your culture, about the opportunity, about the different technology they get to work with. So if you could package it up in a very holistic sense that captures growth, right? How is this gonna help with my career advancement? How does this actually map to my aspirations? Opportunity around technology, around something different, around different space. Compensation, base, equity, and maybe even bonus for some of you. And I would say the last thing is around culture and lifestyle. That all ties in, and if you can have it all sing together, it's pretty magical. Okay, so we talked about aspects of the recruiter experience and some questions. This is something I think you're all familiar with. Everyone does a funnel in different ways. Well, recruiters do it too, just so you know. So having spent time at Zynga, this was just the way we managed. We had to manage this way. And it wasn't always about like, oh, how do we actually just throw bodies at the problem, but more so how do we have discipline around how we're managing our recruiting process? This allows us to have signals on what's going well, what's not going well, detecting patterns, leaky buckets, all that good stuff. Another way that we use this, especially for anticipated growth, is say, for example, one of our hiring managers says, hey, Flo, we want to have 10 engineers hired within a quarter. Because we already have some baseline metrics that we've been capturing, we can reverse engineer and we can tell you, you know, Bill, let me tell you how much capacity this is gonna take of your team. I know you guys are doing a big release. This is gonna happen, right? How much time, how much is invested? And we can tell you if this is even manageable or realistic. Do we need to train up more interviewers? Do we actually need to bring more recruiters into the fold to actually help out? So managing and measuring is something we do. We're very disciplined about it, and it's just really good hygiene. And I think when I think about like bolstering up recruiting efforts and engine, I would never run a team without this. And every single one of my team members, doesn't matter what discipline they're running, whether it's marketing, sales, product, every single one of them can pull this at any given time for any of our hiring managers. So I like to think of this as like either our sword or our shield. One other story I'll tell you is we were actually working on a role. We actually never recruited on it before. Brand new role, new hiring manager, and I started noticing that a lot of folks were dropping out at the phone screen stage, like a lot more than normal. Because typically you would get a 10% conversion from outreach to recruiter screen, that's kind of baseline, and then another 50% from recruiter screen to TPS, and then another 50. But I noticed just a really strange drop off. And I was looking at it week over week and just kind of like trying to detect like, okay, there's a pattern here, there's a signal here. And we actually went back and talked to the candidates that dropped out. And they told us two things. They said, number one, you guys need to button up your story. Your story is just technology story around this new product just needs to button up. The second thing is we actually put a newer interviewer on the panel and just giving him more exposure. So those were the two pieces of feedback. Had we not been capturing this stuff along the way, even with one role we were working on, it doesn't have to be 10, right? But even with one role, we would have lost a lot of time. And so this was super helpful in that process. So You hired a great recruiter. Let's just say all of you guys accomplished this goal. You brought in someone great. They're just maximizing the throughput. They're measuring everything, going crazy with data. But there's this part. There's the people part. Do you guys think that if you invest a little bit more in your candidate journey, it would give you a different edge? It would help you compete for the talent that you want. I'm gonna give you a little peek into what we do at NerdWallet, but before then, let me show you these. So, this is very recent. 12,600 software engineering openings right now, right here in the Bay Area. How many people am I competing with out there? It's probably a lot of you. Okay, not to mention product. Everyone loves product. 7,000 product manager openings in the Bay Area. And by the way, 1,500 more added every day. So if you think about it, there's little tweaks, there's little hacks that you can do to just change the way that you bring candidates into the fold. Your recruiter could be a good part of that story, but a lot of this is up to you. So here's a quick dive into a framework that I made. If you guys can remember anything, remember PAR. PAR, personalization, authenticity, and responsibility. So at NerdWallet, what we do is we're very intentional every single onsite we have, and we've hosted this quarter alone almost 200. Every single person gets a tour in their first 15 minutes. Why do we do that? We want it to be a very immersive experience. We want people to feel like, wow, this is what it's like to work here. We even have a cheat sheet on all the different conference rooms, why they're named what their name, and we can tell that story as we're giving tours to everyone. It's something we love doing, and candidates really get to see what it's like to actually work there. We also recognize that, aside from getting married, buying a house, going through construction, finding a new job is actually really stressful, right? So how do we alleviate that stress? This is someone on my team. They do this. At one point, when I joined very early on, we actually ran out of markers. They actually went out to the store and bought a whole bunch just so they can continue to do this. But again, just having that passion and the ownership and doing the little things around the office that really show that we actually care about these candidates. We also hand out these little booklets. We write a note. If you come on site, we say thank you. Thank you, John, for coming. Really glad you came by the office to meet with us today. And then once you actually accept an offer, we're going to take it back old school. We're actually going to sign a postcard and send it to the candidates. And again, just really making sure that we don't miss any opportunity to make it personal. So remember, you don't have a second chance to make a great first impression. And as a company that has, not had a big brand awareness for many years, this is something that we really felt we can control, and we wanted to own, and we wanted to actually compete in the market. Other aspect that's really important to the culture at NerdWallet is being authentic. It's just being your true self. You're not trying to be this of that company, right? It's who you are as a company and really owning up to it. Some of you guys might actually get a lot of notoriety, get a lot of press, maybe some Glassdoor reviews. What do you do with all that? You're just transparent about it. The way that we actually coach our team is we say, hey, if someone has a tough question, answer it. If they hear about a challenge or experience, answer it. But answer it and let them know how we're actually working through those things, how we're actually navigating through that. The point is that we want to be our best selves, and we want that candidate to see that. Because by the time they get in, if we are successful in our ability to recruit them, they don't want to be sold. No one wants to be sold, and they can tell that right away. The last part in PAR is responsibility. Here's an example. I know it's kind of hard to read, but for every candidate that we have come in for interviews, they get a prep from us. So we try to send this out 48 hours in advance, and it basically just outlines who you're meeting with, what their roles are, how long your interview is, if there's going to be whiteboarding, if there's a case study, all that information that they need. Again, in the spirit of alleviating stress, making sure they have a really good experience and they feel great about coming in. We also proactively send this too. We worked with our design team, and we don't want folks to, hustle through and feel really frazzled coming to our interviews. So what's an easy way for them to come on board? Whether they're biking, they're taking BART, they're driving, parking spots available, all this is at their hands. So we send this before they come in. This is an interview prep. And we, again, do this for every single one of our almost 200 candidates that we had hosted in this past quarter. So every single interview, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a big bulk of your time that's spent, and everyone's busy throughout the day. So how do you get alignment? How do you get everyone on the same page? So if you can see here, there's a brief bio we always include, right? And then for anyone that was doing the phone screen, we want to make sure that we translate that over. Phone screens are anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Let's not miss out on that opportunity. So we include that in there. We include the role, if they're passive, if they're referral. People will know, right, like how much of a sell actually needs to be incorporated in this. This is just a slick, it's a little teaser, if you will, of our benefit summary. And the benefit summary it's just a really good guide for people. So this is something for them to take home to their families and say, hey, considering this offer, let's look through this together, right? So again, giving that information, not having these candidates have to ask for it. We want to be very open, we want to be very transparent, and we want to be in a place where we're always increasing our touch points with the candidate. So make sure, if there's anything that you can do, all of you guys are interviewing, you're spending a lot of time, translate that into a prep that you can actually share with your team. Get everyone aligned on what it is that you're actually evaluating them for. The biggest thing that we started doing that has been awesome for the candidate in their ability to get some feedback from us is we conduct a lot of debriefs. We do it for every single onsite we host. So the debriefs are essentially everyone in the room. We generally have like the decision maker speak at the very end because they can influence the audience. But the purpose of that is not just to come to a decision about what we want to do with the candidate, but it's also to learn and understand what it is that we're looking for, especially if it's a newer role. And the last part is we actually have SLAs. So SLAs, we have them for every aspect of the candidate journey. If we're doing phone screens, we schedule in within 48 hours of someone's request. If someone sends in a referral, we have to get back to them in 48 hours. So again, just really moving the candidates through a really frictionless cycle and making sure that they feel great along the way. So we covered a lot. So how do you really play the long game? Where do you start? What do you do? I mean, a great starting point is partnering up with someone that really cares about people. The other place is start with your current candidate experience. If you can, just map out what does it look like today and where would you grade yourself at every inflection point. And then what are some areas you can invest in? If you're really doing this well, you'll have candidates that go home. They've experienced a beautiful and a magical experience with you and your company, and they'll share it with their loved ones. And that's something that we aspire to do. And I think you guys are all very capable of doing this too, but it starts at the heart of actually caring for the people that you're working with. So thank you.